We're going to do a quick change of the stage, but in the meantime, please welcome Dr. Sebastian Bürgel, from co-founder of HOPR, to talk about staking infrastructure on Safe. Thanks, Sebastian.
Thank you so much for, first of all, for the Safe team to bring us all together here to talk about a safe smart contract ecosystem. My name is Sebastian. I'm founder of HOPR. Normally, I talk more about privacy, and you might be wondering, what am I doing here then? And many people are asking themselves this question, what am I doing here in the larger sense of the word these days? Now, I want to start a little bit with that one, because to me that's important. That's important in the context of what I'm talking about and what we're doing here in general, really. So to me, the onset of what the hell are we doing here is we're building freedom technology. And people say that's a bit much. I don't think so. We're building something that was previously not possible in that sense. And to me, that is the goal of Web3. Now, to get there, one requirement for that, in a technical sense, is having credibly neutral platforms. And having credibly neutral platforms doesn't work if we don't have censorship resistance. And in turn, censorship resistance, of course, and that's something that's talked about a lot, needs decentralization. So I'm just saying that because decentralization in and by itself is not a goal to me. It's a means to an end, and it means is to get us to this path of building freedom technologies that allow individuals to be a bit more free, facing powerful other individuals, facing powerful nation states, and more importantly, and more timely in our times, is facing strong adversarial for-profit corporations. Now, the thing that gets a little bit less attention, unfortunately, is decentralization is not the only thing we need. At least as important is privacy. Because without privacy, if everybody can see your every step on the Web3, you can't do so much. Now, all of this, and that's what we got together here today, needs to be safe, right? Because if everything can get rugged, then what does it all help to be decentralized, to be private? All of that needs to be safe. And I'll talk about how we actually achieve that. Before that, and for a bit of context, I'll focus on this point down here, on this privacy, and talk for a few minutes what we actually do at HOPR and what we want to secure here before I get to talk about secure and safe staking infrastructure. So basically, in our naive little wonderland, we are all interfacing amazing decentralized Web3 technologies. Let me just try to push this up a little. And as we do that, we are facing these peer-to-peer technologies which are actually exposing a lot of metadata about us. So these IP addresses can be used for harvesting purposes, but also for linking, right? We can link on-chain and off-chain identifiers. And that is something which is a real issue for peer-to-peer networks. Disregarding if you're talking about blockchains, decentralized storage networks, decentralized, other sort of high-level services, it's a problem for all of them. The very word peer-to-peer suggests that we do actually connect with these peers in a network, which is not fundamentally aligned with privacy and the protection of metadata. Now, what we do here, the solution is kind of obvious. We want to fix that, right? So we want to provide infrastructure through which you can send data so that third parties cannot track you. It's not just about not tracking, but also not linking your on-chain metadata to off-chain account data, right? So no matter what you do in this Web3 wonderland, it has to be privacy respecting, and the bottom of the stack is data transport, transmitting data from A to B, and that's what we want to secure. That's the goal of HOPR. Now, how exactly do we go about doing that? Just on a super high level. The first one is HOPR is a decentralized packet relay network. So instead of me, a peer, sending data to you, another peer in a network, which shows you where I am, my IP address, and a bunch of other connection metadata, we have this packet relay network. So my data packets are sending via Bob, Charlie, and Dave to Zoe in this example. And by doing so, you're decoupling the sender from the recipient of that information, of these data packets. And for the ones here who are familiar with Tor, yeah, that's indeed a little bit how Tor works. For the ones who use a VPN, it's also a little bit how VPN works, just that we have multiple VPN servers in between. So that's not very private in and by itself. So there's one step how we get significantly stronger privacy than your VPN or even Tor. And the secret to that is packet mixing. That's why HOPR is also called a mixnet. So every node, this is a zoomed-in version to this overview of the network you've seen in the previous slide. Every node in the network is receiving packets, caching them, transforming them, mixing them, and sending them out in a different order. And that's how mixnet have way stronger privacy guarantees than even Tor, which is just directly forwarding packets. And you can do some heuristics on that and pretty quickly find out who is exchanging data with who on Tor. So mixnets are private. Now, I sometimes ask this question. Now it's bear market, and there's very committed people here. Is there anybody here running a Tor node? Hands up for Tor node runners? No, come on. Why are you not running a Tor node? Isn't that very cool technology? Well, your answer might be, why the hell would I run a Tor node, right? So, and that's a fair answer. So the second change compared to Tor that we bring in here is incentives. So HOPR is an incentivized mixnet, and these incentives have to be carefully designed because we do not want to destroy the privacy that we set out to establish in the first place. So what we're doing here, what is shown here, is again a zoomed-in version on one path in this multi-hop relay infrastructure. You see the data packets kind of hopping on top. We have this onion encryption that's visualized there. What you see on the bottom is what we call proof of relay. So every single of these relayers gets paid for their service if they can provide a proof that they've actually forwarded the packet in a correct fashion. So it's a bottom-up network, in my mind, how the Web3 should work, that incentivizes the honestly behaving data relayers with economic rewards for doing so. Now, what is not shown here is that this is happening in a probabilistic fashion. If you would imagine that you send a packet and everyone gets a payout immediately, let's think about you could settle that instantaneously, hypothetically speaking. You would leak a whole lot of information about the payment trails, right? That would be bad. In order to fix that, we have probabilistic payments, so similar to some proof of work systems where you need to calculate a whole bunch of hashes until you have one successful one that yields you a payout. Here you also have to forward a whole bunch of packets until you have one that was a payout. And therefore, we preserve privacy on the payment layer as well. Cool. So that is on a very high level how HOPR works. And we've seen here that there's node runners who are having access to HOPR tokens, which is what they need in order to be a participant in this payment channel provided relay infrastructure. And the question is, how do we run that stuff, right? So I want to talk now about the second part here of decentralization. At HOPR, we really believe in decentralization. What does that even mean? In the context of Web3 infrastructure, it means the power to run that infrastructure should be with individuals, not just with AWS heads nerds who don't like us and so on, right? It should be with the individual. Kind of a no-brainer. Again, in the Ethereum ecosystem, right, we have amazing projects such as DAppNode, which make that really easy, which is great. But at the same time, that brings a bunch of challenges, because you running a DAppNode out of your living room are probably not a DevOps specialist who has years of experience in secure infrastructure on a network level specifically. So how do we make that part safe? Basically, there's two options, right? So you can run a cloud node, and here, just to give you a feeling for the state of the art of Web3 staking infrastructure for you as a home node runner, this is a quote from a 9-digit market cap project from their kind of staking docs, right? So they're basically telling you to copy-paste key files around, to copy-paste passwords around. You can, by the way, for convenience, also put that into a shell file that you just run there so you don't have it in your history and whatnot. So yeah, that's not great. Yeah, that's actually pretty bad. I will not dox the project in question here. It's also not about doxing that project. This is just to show that we are very damn early when it comes to any sort of incentivized Web3 infrastructure. And we need to have a serious conversation on how to get better. Now, of course, we know cloud infrastructure is kind of uncool, right? So that's not truly decentralized. I already mentioned Upnode, great friends of ours, and they're trying to really help you. Now, everyone in this room is pretty smart and is a little bit resistant. So what we typically see here is, Upnode is saying, we do auto updates. And there's very smart people saying, hey, auto updates are evil because you could ship like some bad software to us and rug the whole system. And you say, of course, I will always update my system. Well, probably you don't, right? So probably you don't. So what happens is your DApp node that's getting dusty under your couch is a serious attack vector for evil mate attacks or whoever has physical or virtual access to your DApp node. The number of 0 days, container exploits and so on is pretty significant. So how do we solve that? And unsurprisingly, the solution is already in the title of this slide. We have to make things safe. Great memes in that name. So what we set up here is we have a node. In our case, it's a HOPR node. And this node is not doing everything, right? So far, we have an infrastructure where typically people, as previously shown, YOLO copy-paste some key files around, hope that nobody intercepts it in the meantime, nobody logs your key file password, and so on. So instead of your node being in full control of everything, we say, hey, your node only does what it is good at. What is a node good at? Well, it's typically running in a highly automated environment, and it's always on. Right? That's what your node is good at, and it should do that. On the other hand, get to know safe. Safe is a thing that keeps money and access to smart contracts safe. So that's kind of a good combination, right? So we can move these capabilities out of a node and put it where it belongs into the safe. Now, basically, to connect these two, we then developed a node management module, which is very highly influenced and basically based on Zodiac, which is developed by Gnosis Guild, which we customized to our specific purpose here. So you can use this node management module to define how much money your node has access to, because it has to have access to some funds. In our case, that means it has to have access to funds so that it can open payment channels, so that it can top up payment channels when they run low, and so on. What it can also do is this capability management module allows you to define what smart contracts and what functions in what smart contracts your node can actually access. Right? So it gives you really fine control over what exactly your node can do by itself and what your safe can do with a potentially very complicated multisig, with your hardware wallets, with your, if you want to bring in a custodian, of course, do that also. So all that stuff you can set up in safe. So if you think about it on a high level, it's a little bit similar to what Ethereum staking does. I think that was Vitalik very recently saying that he's not staking more of his ETH because it's so complicated to set up a multisig. I find it pretty weird, but anyway, Vitalik, we want to help you. So by the way, we're not thinking about ETH staking. This is made for token staking, right? So Ethereum has this so-called withdrawal key. If you run an Ethereum validator, it has this separated withdrawal key to prevent exactly that issue. Right? So still, a withdrawal key is a single EOA. That's not super cool. What we are proposing here and what we are, want to have people discussing for other infrastructures as well is how about you don't just have a single key, but you actually have a multi-sig for your staking infrastructure. And that's exactly what we set up here. Okay, cool. Now let's dive in a little bit deeper. How does this actually work? I'll get a little bit technical for the next 5 minutes. Don't worry, I'll do an entertaining demo afterwards. So you can, of course, not just manage one node. You could also manage multiple nodes. And what do multiple nodes, what does it actually mean under the hood? Well, it means actually keys, right? So these nodes do have access to some key material. In our case, they need these, we call them chain keys, to manage payment channels. We call them chain keys because also we have kind of off-chain keys which are required for the package transformation and so on. So that's what we use these guys for. So you can have your node management module, which can configure a bunch of chain keys, like individually what exactly they can do, and is connected to your safe, which can have a bunch of, we call them admin keys, which is basically owners in a safe nomenclature. Yeah, so that's basically the setup. So now I will dive into the life cycle of how that actually works on a technical level briefly. So we have developed a node stake factory, which is effectively just a factory to set this all up for you, right? So similar to the safe proxy factory, which all of you have been in touch when you deploy a safe. The safe is deployed through the safe proxy factory, which deploys your safe proxy. And in addition to that, we needed this factory to deploy our node management module. So just in the same way how your safe is deployed, we have this module that, again, manages the different nodes that you might have. That's a universal upgradable proxy. Pretty cool development there to make that upgradable in the same fashion how your safe is upgradable. Now, with that, you have your final ensemble. In the center, of course, you have your node safe that can send transactions. And you can operate this like a normal safe, right? So you have an admin or multiple admins that sends a transaction. It sends XDAI. We are living on Gnosis chain. It can manage payment channels. It can send tokens. Of course, you could also multi-send it. You batch these transactions, which also works. Now, the thing that's different is the stuff on top here, right? So the node safe can also be controlled if you granted that capability by these chain keys, so by one or multiple nodes that you're running in the background that can do some of these features itself. So you could say, it could short circuit some of the multi-sig capabilities if you choose so. So, be careful with what you build there. Yeah, so with that, I would say let's take a look at that. So I talked about nodes in general. So what I talked about here is, and this is our code, which is obviously open source, can be used for any sort of staking infrastructure. Especially I encourage people who have token-based staking infrastructure where you have services that run 24/7 to check that out. I will show you how that works for HOPR and what we've deployed there. So we have made this the staking hub to onboard users, right? So I'm going to try to demo that here with my beloved MetaMask. I think somebody called it recently the AK-47 of wallets. It's not great, but it kind of always works. Let's see if it does. So yeah, I'm connected here. We see that I don't have a safe that's been hooked up here. It tells me what's all going on here. I need some of these HOPR token. I need some XDAI to get going. And eventually, I will need a node, right? So I'm going to create a safe. This is my the account that I'm connected to. Yeah, looks about right. So every node runner in the HOPR ecosystem, so currently we have around 350 node runners, are deploying a safe, right? So every single node runner in there has their own safe. Unless there might be some pro users which manage multiple nodes with one. Cool. So it seems my safe has been deployed, and what happens in the background now as well is that the module gets deployed and the module gets configured to be hooked up in the safe. Sweet. And of course, infrastructure that got deployed like 2 hours ago is a little bit jerky here on me. OK, I'm not going to deploy it again. Anyway, I don't have this account funded, so the next step here would be funding my safe. I will switch over to an account that is already funded and show you a little bit how that one works and what we see in this whole setup. It's probably an indexer issue. Cool. So we have an account which has already added a node. And yeah, on this one, you see a tiny amount of HOPR tokens that it has staked. So pretty high allowance here just for demo purposes. I can connect it to my node, and I can, if I wanted to, I could use our own custom-made interface. I think this is something that we will see in the future, and for, I think, people who think in a safe ecosystem, something that I find important. We will see people using Safe, not using the standard interface at app.safe.global, but using their own integrations. Like this one here is custom-made and exposes exactly what we need and not more, because users don't need to care about all that. If they want to, they can use safe.global or onchaindan.com, which is a very nice thing if you have like lazy cosigners. They give you like push notifications on Telegram stuff and so on. It's kind of nice. So yeah, that's something that allows you to kind of customize this interface. We run this on-premise, so we run the Safe services on-site. I'll get back to that in the end when I talk about kind of future directions that I think the Safe ecosystem needs to internalize for where we're headed here. Now, I'll just briefly show the admin UI of my node. So this was the Safe. This is our custom-made Safe infrastructure. Connected to that one is our HOPR admin interface of a node, right? So this one is connected to your node. You see that this one here is, it sees its Safe address. So let's just check that real quick. So yeah, that one is a typical Safe proxy. So it looks exactly like all the other Safes. This one is still, I haven't done any additional configuration. It's still a one of one. And in addition to that, it has this, it has two modules actually added to it. Cool. So what you can see here is this node is currently running. It's, let's see, it's connected to 111 peers in the network. What can we do here? Just for a quick demo, I'm just going to send myself a message, like via some other nodes. So I'm going to send a message back to myself via some other nodes. So you remember this kind of mixed net infrastructure? I'm just going to show that real quick here. So it's a very quirky chat app that's integrated inside the HOPR node. It's not meant to be a chat app. It's just meant for debugging purposes. Hello from SafeCon. And I'm going to send that. I'm going to send that via one intermediate node back to myself. So let's see if that one worked. Evidently, it did not. So I'm sending a message, not direct, via one intermediate node. This node. Whoa. OK, that just rocked my demo. Sorry for that. No, here we go. Cool. I have no idea where that message just went. Well, privacy, I guess. Oh, OK. Yeah, I can do a demo later on when I'm not on stage. That makes it a bit easier. All right. So with that one, I'm just saying we have deployed safes for every HOPR node. I think this is the way to go for safe staking in general. We want a separation of concerns, which is operational complexity on your node side, security of funds on the other side. These two things do not belong on the same machine. They should be separated. That's what we've been building here. I encourage everyone to look at the code, fork it, play around with it. The user frontend that I've been showing is also open source. You find it in our GitHub organization. Now, I talk about this in a context that I would like other projects to think about this. But the real reason, the reality is really, it's work, right? Everybody kind of has their, even if it's quirky, people have their setup. People have their smart contracts built, their indexes around that, whole lot of infrastructure around it. It's work. It's extra effort. Why would people do it? I say, well, because it's safe, right? But I would say there's another reason. And the other reason is the safe ecosystem. Just showing like a few examples here that I think are really powerful if you think about it. So if you run nodes, if you run node infrastructure, chances are you actually have to do accounts. I know, accounting, nobody wants to talk about it. But Cryptio, for example, has native integrations for safe. So if you want to automate that stuff, because say you want to have a strategy that automatically takes profits and like sells them for something else and so on, you want automation. We had heard Gelato here before, and their plans for L2 as well. Gelato is deeply integrated into Safe and works out of the box, which is really cool. If you build stuff that's kind of complicated, you want simulations with Tenderly, that's cool. If you want to go like really crazy, the team of Autonolas built this Olas thing here for kind of collectively owned funds, and I would add and infrastructure. So really cool stuff that you can tap into by building on top of the Safe infrastructure that you simply couldn't do if you would use your home-cooked smart contracts and kind of weird DevOps infrastructure around it, right? So I think this is really powerful, and I think that's the real reason why people should consider using Safe for staking infrastructure. Finally, I want to finish it off with a few observations that we had when building infrastructure and to talk about this transition that Safe has been publishing a few weeks ago. I would say this transition to me really is from the original Gnosis Safe, which we all perceive as a multi-sig, a product, right, to the Safe core protocol, which is not just this one multi-sig that I can use to secure my funds, but which can do much more. And I think there's some practical and some mental transitions that we should internalize. So I'm a practical guy, so I'll start with that. So I think we need to rethink a DevOps mission, right? Everybody has DevOps kind of doing stuff, and typically that's an internal provider, right? That's an internal provider for originally Gnosis Safe. I think DevOps is an ecosystem enabler that runs this stuff all over the place, right? So I find this kind of profound. It's a very different way of operating. It's an ecosystem enabler that brings these apps and services out there to other users. Now, this architecture of these services is also something that I think we need to rethink. Initially, app.safe.global, awesome, right? It works. That's pretty cool. And these guys are doing an absolutely fantastic job to not just make sure it's there 24/7, but actually, when Sebastian comes and something fucks up on a Saturday night, somebody will write back to Sebastian. I don't know how you guys do that, but it's amazing, right? Now, still, we need to think about how do we decentralize that? I think in the first step, it could be something federated, right? Because one thing that I didn't show is actually, if you send a multi-sig transaction through this HOPR safe setup, you cannot see them in app.safe.global. Why? Well, because we're weirdos, and we said we want to run these services on premise of HOPR, right? So we can debug it more easily. Now, that's kind of a problem. So a federated or potentially eventually totally decentralized approach to these services, such as the transaction manager. For the ones who are not familiar with it, it's the service that gives you a pop-up and tells you, hey, there's something to sign, please sign it here, right? You have to get that from somewhere. That's a web service that's running somewhere, that's running in a centralized fashion. Getting that to a decentralized open future is a quite different animal. And finally, it's not just technical, it's about community involvement. It's really cool to see the Safe DAO. It's really cool to see the participation and the discussion that we see in the forum, that we see in the voting platforms and on social media, obviously. But I think it needs more than that. Like, as Safe goes towards a protocol, I think really discussions on this core protocol, on architecture and implementation of it, is something that should have really community participation to, reclaim ownership. And with that, I'm closing here. And thank you so much for your attention. Happy to answer some questions. Thank you.
Questions in the back. Can we get a mic in the back, please?
Hey, really like the effort to decentralize all the building pieces to staking successfully. But as we all know, thus far, users do not stake just for the sake of securing the network, but they also stake for rewards, right? And so they stake for some type of profitability. This is a known fact thus far. And so how are you going to incentivize these users not to take care of the DevOps piece? And how are you going to make it easy for them to just get those rewards.
Yeah, totally. You're 100% right. So basically, that's part of the reason I was focusing more on the dev angle here, but you're 100% right. So we deploy these safes for them, so you don't have to care about anything of that. If you don't trust us, you can run your own, right? But in the case of HOPR, people run HOPR nodes to earn HOPR tokens for relaying data, right? So that's the goal, and that's how people make money. And that should be as easy as possible, and that's why we have provided this custom-made user interface. You could have done the whole thing through app.safe.global, but it would have been a whole lot of quirky work. We want to make that easy. That's why we deployed it, and I think others will do something similar. I think there was another question somewhere here.
One in the front here.
Thank you for the talk. Just a quick question to the beginning of your talk. Could you elaborate a bit on how the proof of relay works?
Yes. So let's say I am the sender of a message, and let's say Malik here is the first relayer who I choose. He is running a HOPR node. If he is getting this data packet from me, in the header of this data packet, we have key material. From this key material, he can actually generate a key half. And let's say you're the next downstream relayer from Malik. He'll send this data packet to you. If you received it and you did an integrity check, you get back with an acknowledgement to him. This acknowledgement contains a second key half. So basically, it's a key sharing. And then by taking these two key halves together, he can check if this payment, this joint key, we call this a ticket, is a payment, or if it's a winning ticket, or if it's a losing ticket. So if it's a winning ticket, once in a blue moon, you go to the smart contract and redeem funds. So there's a payment channel. In this case, if he received a payment, there's a payment channel from me to him, and he can withdraw some funds from that payment channel.
And how is this linked to the contents of the message? Can we just do back and forth these keys and headers and just kind of mine the rewards without actually sending anything?
You could do that, but somebody would have to pay for it. So in this case, that's me. So HOPR, I didn't put too much emphasis on that one, but it's source routed, and it's also the sender pays for it. So yes, you could do that. If I sponsor it, you can keep going around.
Thank you.